What is a story? Well, stories are about experiences. They're a way of walking a mile in someone else's shoes. A tool for simultaneously understanding the world and being understood by it. Now, I am not a woman. I'm not American, and I certainly wasn't alive during the Civil War. But a story like Little Women can give me perspective on what it must have felt like to experience all those things. To experience what it was like to grow up with a father who might not return from war. To experience the grief of losing a child to sickness. To experience being financially dependent on a husband. Longing for nice things, but also not wanting him to feel as if he isn't enough. And to experience the struggle, both internal and external, that comes from challenging the very notion of what a woman is expected to be. Through stories, we share our experiences, and through understanding each other's experiences, we find empathy. We better appreciate both the things that make us different and the things that we have in common. Because in as many ways as the March Sisters are different to me, they're also the same. I know what it's like to love someone who doesn't love you back. I know what it's like to be angry at your sibling. I know what it's like to have grand dreams for your life and then question them.
Women, they have minds and they have souls as well as just hearts, and they've got ambition and they've got talent as well as just beauty. And I'm so sick of people saying that love is just all a woman is fit for. I'm so sick of it. But I'm so lonely.
Through ink on a page, actors on a stage, or footage edited into film, the stories that capture our hearts best persevere through time. So how ironic is it to think that Louisa May Alcott's novel was hard fought for? That people doubted that an honest story of someone's life would be of interest? There is so much value in sharing our experiences, and we live in no better time to do so. Today, anyone, at a moment's notice, can publish their story for an audience in the millions. I've had the privilege of learning from scientists, Navy SEALs, politicians and filmmakers, people from North Korea, Australia and Portugal, snapshots into the lives of people ordinary and one of a kind. There's so much to learn about how life is different all around the world, the infinitely unique experiences that have shaped us into the individuals that we are. In some ways, I think it's made us more empathetic than we've ever been, more tolerant of specific challenges that others might have. But in other ways, I think it's fucking us up. I think there are too many perspectives, too many conflicting opinions, and we don't know how to handle it. It's making it hard to communicate, it's making it hard for people not to lash out, not to devalue each other. Everyone's talking and no one is listening.
You know that they're interested in your money and not your personality, which is what makes you insecure.
You guys have seen the trend where girls are being asked if they would rather be stuck in the forest with a bear or a man, and obviously we're saying a bear.
You said you're an Asian dudes? All right, let's see it. Let's see if this works for me.
Made the most sense for this room.
That's very out of touch.
He talks that way, the way he did on this tape, it confirmed that he is truly a racist.
You know, I don't know if you realize this. I often bend over backwards trying to figure out a way to respectfully convey my criticism. But I'm not going to take the time to do that today because this is one of the dumbest brain-dead takes I've ever seen in my life.
Yet you shouldn't judge your neighbor, but you got to rebuke stupid behavior. If people...
Only white people have privilege.
Okay, let me guess. People are outraged. They think
hate speech is ugly. but people hate each
other.
other.
Get a job.
What is a story? Stories are a product, the business of entertainment, and there is no greater exporter of stories than the USA. Quippy films and wholesome slices of American life have been shipped around the world for decades. But I feel there used to be a better balance between profit and purpose. There is a place for the easygoing nonsense that sells, and the important stories that deserve to be told. The Poster film by Steven Spielberg is a story about the stress and risk that whistleblowers and journalists took on when publishing the Pentagon Papers. The drive they had to serve the people, even at the risk of destroying their careers. To tell the truth. To tell stories that might impact the very way their country is governed. Stories have tremendous power. That power can convince us to dedicate our lives to a higher purpose or to commit great atrocities. Therefore, it is the responsibility of those who tell stories not just to profit but to add value, to question those in power, to push the boundaries. Killers of the Flower Moon wrestles with these ideas, telling a story about the suffering of the Osage Nation, offering perspective and maybe even vindication, while also admitting that it profits off of all that tragedy. You know, at least Martin Scorsese had the decency to be honest. The same can't be said for the American media machine, which in its hunger for attention and profit fuels the division of their people and a growing distrust in the institutions that lead them. What is real? What can be trusted? What can be agreed upon? No one knows anymore, and it gives rise to chaos. Then all that anxiety, confusion, and outrage is exported to the rest of the world.
I wish that we could just do a daily news show about video games.
Fake news spreads 6 times faster than true news. We're being bombarded with rumors.
It's impossible to tell who actually believes what they're saying and who's saying the most outlandish thing they can think of to go viral. It's like
marijuana, the burning weed with its roots in hell.
Start making these stories and putting them in the newspaper about Mexicans and black people smoking this new drug called marijuana and raping white women.
What drives user base numbers and revenue is anger.
So Facebook or Twitter is making more money as users are getting angrier.
Who knows what's going on? Who knows who's running anything? If AI video is so goddamn good, they can take a photo of you and have you say anything. So who knows what Putin's saying, and who knows what Zelensky's saying?
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about trouble and trending irresponsible, one-sided news.
What is a story? Stories are a way to condense our biggest ideas into something anyone can understand, to simplify them into a more palatable form, to aid us in having critical conversations. On the surface, The Whale is the story of one man's last week of life, a story of obesity and loneliness, but at its core, The Whale is the story of what we do with our pain, of how pain warps us physically and mentally, of the many vices we use to cope with pain, whether they be food, alcohol, devotion, or cigarettes, of how pain can be so unbearable that death feels like the only release. We might see the external results of pain manifested into something grotesque or cruel, but it takes a lot more to see where it comes from. To see the child rejected by their father, to see the husband guilt-ridden because of the impact their presence or lack of had on the lives of those that they love. The only remedy to pain in this story seems to be forgiveness, either in receiving it or by finding a way to give it to ourselves. The Whale is disturbing and stressful and deeply depressing, but unlike the conveyor belt of hollow entertainment that people choose to watch today, it actually has something to say.
And I felt saddest of all when I read the boring chapters that were only descriptions of whales, because I knew that the author was just trying to save us from his own sad story, just for a little while. This book made me think about my own life. And then it made me feel glad for mine.
But are these messages getting through? Are people appreciating them and reflecting on how they might view their own struggles through a new lens? Or are we just getting stuck on the very basics? Splashing about in anger on the surface, reading reviews of The Whale, I didn't see the same appreciation I had. That feeling of being shown a part of myself and then being asked to look deeper. I saw people bashing the film for its portrayal of obesity, calling it untrue and disrespectful. I saw people complain yet again about representation in Hollywood, as if actors shouldn't exist and that people should only pretend to be the exact thing that they are. The same tired dismissals of a story because it doesn't perfectly embody your lived experience, while disregarding that it actually might for someone else. It's like everything that The Whale is trying to say is belittled, missed. How many stories is that the case for? Can Americans see that civil war has no interest in preaching which politics are correct and just? It's just showing what real violence looks like, what the end result of a country that can't agree looks like. For years now, I've watched in frustration as neither the liberals or conservatives seem able to realize that they are both at fault, just as bad as each other. They have their opinions and beliefs that they hold on to like life preservers. They shout over the fence and point fingers like children, but refuse to sit down at the table and settle their differences. There are very real wars going on right now because of this exact same inability to find common ground and just listen to each other. So Civil War gets its point across perfectly and frighteningly without having to touch on any particular social issue. Do the American people understand this? Are they seeing how they appear to the rest of the world? Even Barbie, the biggest film of last year, I feel was lost on people. While balancing product placement, humor, and blockbuster appeal, it still managed to capture how confusing and overwhelming it feels to be a woman.
Never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line. It's too hard, it's too contradictory, and nobody gives you a medal or says thank you.
It's a great achievement, yet I still feel the biggest message is missed. As I watched TikToks and read reviews, I saw the men of the film and the men of the real world painted as villains, for being manipulative and dominating, for taking something that was meant to be for women and finding their own way to relate to it. I saw us all get bogged down in the simple yet again, men versus women, patriarchal oppression run rampant, or feminist propaganda. But this identity crisis felt by women isn't exclusive. Barbie acknowledges Ken's confusion, Ken's lack of purpose and place in the world being called into question just as much as Barbie's. The deepest idea that I see in Barbie applies to all of us. It's acknowledgement of the fact that our world has become so confusing that no one knows who to be. No one knows what the world wants us to be. No one knows what the right answer is for so many basic questions. It's hard to get people to go see a movie that doesn't have a superhero or giant gorilla in it. But even when we do watch something of substance, so few seem to appreciate the caliber of what our greatest storytellers are saying. And virtually no one seems able to utilize any of that insight to look at themselves and the world around them in a more thoughtful way. It all just blurs into noise. What's the point of telling stories if no one understands them?
It is literally impossible to be a woman. You are so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. Like, we have to always be extraordinary. But somehow we're always doing it wrong.
To be a girl, because you have to live up to a bunch of different standards of society, but it's just like goofy people pretending to be dolls in a very corny and cliche on purpose
You just
way.
wanted another hit. Viral imagery blasting in your eyeballs.
The only thing good that I have in my life is when I get high. And if you take that away, my life is terrible. And if you've been an addict for a long time, the longer you're an addict, in fact, the more that's true, right? Because the more your life is a wreck.
Yeah.
And then you're forced to deal with it when you come off and you realize, like, oh my God, I'm 45 years old and I'm a heroin addict. Like, what the fuck? How is this?
Exactly.
And then now you're sober and your life is in shambles, and
Yeah.
you try to like figure out, how did you go so wrong? And then the only thing that made you feel good was heroin. You want to go back.
Understanding of why fat suits are inherently harmful and fat phobic.
And we conflate that with value, and we conflate it with truth.
A whole generation is more anxious, more depressed.
Okay, I'm gonna talk to Marcus.
Now get the fuck off my expo set now! Get the fuck off!
You're not fed up with it. The black people in poverty, black people rapping, black people as slaves, black people murdered by the police, whole soaring narratives about black folks in dire circumstances who still manage to maintain their dignity before they die. I mean, I'm not saying these things aren't real, but we're also more than this. It's like so many writers like you can't envision us without some white boot on our necks.
What is a story? Stories for me have always been about escapism, a break from reality, the ability to disappear into a world of fantasy, a world of superheroes and hope, a world full of amazing fights and heartwarming bonds, a moment away from the stresses of school, work, or the outside world. But it's becoming too much. It's becoming dangerous. We consume more television, more video games, more social media, more news than ever. We are swimming in an abundance of stories, an abundance of escape, to the point that we neglect our real lives for the digital world. We rely on our screens for our businesses, our social connection, our emotional regulation. We listen to podcasts when we sleep, watch news while we eat, post pictures instead of interacting. We take in so many ideas, so much information, that it becomes hard to think for ourselves, hard to pause and consider anything with depth. And each of us have our own stories we're invested in. One person is focused on a story of celebrity gossip, another on the story of their political party, and another on the story of prophets. Say what you want about the Bible, but at least people were once able to unite under the same banner, be guided by the same values. Now there are so many stories for each of us to choose from that if a meteor was hurtling towards the earth, we would all either ignore it or be distracted by something else. We'd be totally fucked.
Who got it? Who got it?
Amnesia. But
of the wing wasn't questioned there. They tell exactly what this a burnt, but it's a cooked burnt.
This is officially your yacht! Woo! Congrats, man! The only catch is, I'm gonna do everything in my power to destroy it. And it's...
Of course, in the dorms, everybody's playing news, driving in for hours and
I want to start this video by telling you about something very dumb that I did recently, and
I have worked on this piece of writing for weeks. Writing and erasing and rewriting over and over. Trying to work out what I'm trying to say. Trying to find the right words. And I've learned a number of things from this project. My life is cluttered with so much unnecessary junk. So much information, so much content. It's all just a distraction. It adds nothing to my life. It holds me back from doing the things that are actually meaningful. And it's making me a worse version of myself. It's so hard to concentrate and tackle something as gargantuan as what is a story, when your head is filled with so many thoughts that don't belong to you. And even if that wasn't the case, and my mind was empty, I don't think I could have done it either. To define what a story is such a big task. It's such a big idea, that I don't think it could be done in a single piece of writing. Because every story I've ever come across has taught me something different. The story of young Sheldon was told across 7 seasons and 141 episodes. I was a fly on the wall of the Cooper household for a long time. I watched Missy develop from nothing more than a source of one-liners into a complex, overlooked, and angsty teen. I watched Georgie grow from a knuckle-headed idiot into a responsible young father. I watched Mary question her faith and George question his marriage. I watched Connie lose her home and act as a parent for Mandy. And I watched child prodigy Sheldon awkwardly fumble his way through high school and university. The feeling of connection I have to this fictional family could not have been built in a single episode. It took hours. It took years. I think that's why sitcoms still stand tall as one of the most successful modern ways of telling stories. For decades, whether it be Friends, The Office, or Seinfeld, these characters have been second families for people to come home to and spend their evenings with. Decade-long stories broken up into digestible 30-minute chunks. Each chunk self-contained and filled with jokes, but building over time a larger, more personal story of what life is like for so many of us. And that's it at its core. Stories like young Sheldon capture life. When George Cooper dies, watching his family each grieve in their own personal way left me sobbing. Because just days earlier I'd attended the funeral of someone I loved, and watched my family grieve in those same ways. And it's weird to say, but I cried more at George Cooper's funeral than I did at the real one I went to. Not because I cared more, but because stories have always had that power to draw out my emotions and really make me feel them, in a way that nothing else does. It's one of the reasons they mean so much to me. In the final episode of Young Sheldon, we see that this entire series has been told through the perspective of a far older Sheldon writing his memoir. In my own way, I've been doing the same thing since the start of the year. I've been journaling most days, trying to capture my life on a page, trying to work out what I feel, what I think, and what direction I want to aim myself in. The process of Sheldon writing his memoir allowed him to reflect on how hard his parents worked to support him, even when they didn't understand him. Writing my journal, especially after the last few days, has led me to understand that I'm not going to work out what a story is in a single piece of writing. just as I couldn't sum up my uncle's life in a single piece of writing. Each story I come across carries its own piece of the puzzle in defining what a story is. Each story I come across has its own things to teach me. I've spent my whole life as a student of storytelling. It's taught me so much, and without all those lessons, I wouldn't be who I am today. To sum all of that up into a few pages would be the same as summing up everything that I am as a person into a few pages. It just can't be done, in my opinion. It took 141 episodes to tell the story of young Sheldon. Who knows how many it might take me to tell mine. In some ways, maybe this is my memoir. The story of how I studied storytelling my whole life, and what I learned as a student.